Welcome to Season 2 of the Age of Motocross, and I'm your host, Jim Chamberlain. Today's episode is all about the tracks of the Maritimes, the loam, the sand, the rocky tracks, the double jumps, the triple jumps, the tabletops. Everything you can imagine in motocross is available here in the Maritimes. Sit back, listen to the sound of the rumble of the four-stroke and the high-pitched whine of the incredible two-strokes while I take you on a tour of maritime motocross. And don't forget, let's pin it. On today's show, 4 o'clock mornings, stale coffee, grumpy partners, the glamour of leaving for a race, and we call it road trip. Jumping, flying through the great beyond, stretching out to the birds. If you don't know proper jumping techniques, you're not going to reach the stars. Our first race, the adrenaline, the butterflies, the blood's a-boiling, and you're ready to go. What's that going to be like? A new segment this week, Words to Live By. But first, the road trip. Gear loading time, 6 o'clock in the morning. Only drawback to this sport, you got to be up at such an early time, but part of the deal. Stop at a local coffee shop. Racetrack is the next stop. Well, there's the beast, taking out of storage. A lot of practice early this year, more than I normally get being a school teacher by trade. It's a busy day and hard to get out at night. Weekends, you know what kind of spring we've had in 2015. Lots of snow. The winter of 2014-15, so harder to get out. The tracks were wet. Actually, this race that we're going to today is May 30th, is actually 27 days late. We were scheduled to be on the track the first weekend of May 2015, and in fact, too much snow, too much wetness, and they postponed the whole racing season by an entire month. So we are actually 27 or 30 days late. And the season is kicking off, and it always kicks off in the Atlantic region at River Glade. It's sort of the big mama of the races and the big mama track, and here's the beast that I'm going to compete with. What do you do when you practice? Well, you corners, as we did before. We talked about starts. What about jumps? Like the slap shot in hockey, every little kid wants to get out there and practice the slap shot. It's the first thing they want to do. Yet they practice it, and they're not even certain if they have the right technique. So maybe you can shoot at 70 miles an hour, or 100 kilometers an hour, but maybe you could have shot at 130 kilometers an hour if someone would show you the right technique. The same thing applies to motocross.
You see all these young fellas out there on the track, and they want to jump, they want to jump, they want to jump. And you see, even though I don't consider myself a professional, I certainly can see a lot of errors that they commit. And one of the biggest things is they don't get off their seats. Younger drivers and drivers that sort of aren't in the know tend to stay seated when they hit the jump. Now, you have a shock absorber on the back of your bike, you have 2 shock absorbers on the front of your bike, forks, but do you know that you have 2 more shock absorbers, and they're called your knees? If you're standing on the foot peg, you certainly have a lot more ability to control your bike if you allow your knees to absorb some of the jump from the landing. Also, the landing itself. How are you practicing your landing? Get on YouTube. Go look at some of the professionals. They have a lot of how-to videos. And the biggest thing they talk about is obviously if you're landing on a flatter ground, you're going to land with your back wheel first and then gently with your front wheel coming down. If you're landing on, which is very common in motocross, the tabletop, on the downhill of the tabletop, you want to land more evenly so that you can apply your brakes on your front and rear when you need to. There's a lot of different techniques on jumping. The biggest error that we see the most is people do not stand up when they're in the air. There's pre-jumping, there's seat bouncing, all of these are advanced techniques that I don't pretend to have a full command of, but certainly when I do practice, I make sure that I'm conscious of the position of my body so my bike is in a neutral position in midair. You want the front tire slightly elevated above the back tire, and in order to get that on a regular basis, when you're traveling at race speed, what do you need to do? Practice, practice, practice. When we come back, we're going to look at the first race of the season, Glade Motocross Park. Stick around. Welcome back. Daytona Speedway, the Indianapolis, and I have to add this to the sentence, Mountain Motocross Facility. We call it Glade Motocross Park, the premier park for racing in the Maritimes, founded in 1978 and has been going strong ever since. This facility hosted some of the greatest national races in the motocross world. Many fast Americans who you read in the magazines and on television have been here racing, and the greatest Canadian drivers have all graced us with their speed and their ability on this track. Have a walk around and a look at Glade Motocross Park.
Chamberlain, yeah.
I got a new hat, I got some new riding gear, bought some new gloves. I'm all ready to get out there on the track, and this is year 38. The butterflies are still as big. I call them bats now in my stomach. I'm anxious to get out on the track. We had practice this morning. It went very well. We already have a few injuries. The guy parked next to us, his finger's pointing in a direction I didn't think you could point your finger in, and he's off to the hospital. I saw a van pull out with a kid holding an ice pack to his cheek, but that's part of the sport. There's over 300 riders here. We don't dwell on injury, but any sport there is a potential of injury. But we're excited. The track looks really good today. We're a month late into the season because of the crazy winter that we had, but we're all excited. The butterflies are there, the bike's working great. We're waiting for the sound of moto number 1 to get underway. Well, we're getting ready to line up for the race. There is the intermediates that are just before us. The junior class is on the line or out on the track right now. Some of my competitors aren't here yet. I'd like to be there early. I'd like to get lots of time to relax, get ready, focus on what I need to be doing. A new year, a new beginning. I have a couple goals in mind early in the season, and one of the goals is to crack the top 10, to judge my speed as to what I need to improve upon. It's very difficult to know how fast you're going when you're by yourself practicing, how fast the class is. It's really been about 2 years since I've raced consistently at a competitive level. So this year I want to really take a good hard stab at it and work at my speed and such and see what I need to be working on. So today I'm looking for a top 10 finish. That would be my goal. Certainly I'd love to win, and nobody would be happier than me if I actually pulled off a victory. If I can pull a top 5, I certainly would be doing cartwheels through the pits. But I think realistically, and I have to be realistic about this, a top 10 finish is where I need to be this time of the year, and I can gauge my speed and have a look at who's faster than me, what I need to do to improve. So a lot of calculations going on, and I hope I do the right calculations. Well, we're minutes away from the moto for my class, but like any other day of racing, there's lots of different classes going on. And right now, what's on the line before I get to the line is what's called the MX2 Intermediate and Pro Riders. They're driving 250cc or less sized engines, and they're in what we call staging. They've lined up on the gate. They're waiting for the moto before them to finish. What will happen at that point is a flagman will stand out in the middle of the track indicating that we're timing down to take off. You'll see a 30-second board go up, which means you have 30 seconds. At 30 seconds, once it goes down, if your bike is not started or prepared, tough luck. Now the gate's going to go. Within 5 seconds, he'll show a 5-second board. Once he turns the board sideways, at that point, the start is in the hands of the gate starter. He's hiding in that wooden box, and he has 0 to 5 seconds to step on the lever, and the gate drops down. Take a watch. 5-second board is up. Gates in the hands, they're off. 15-second board, now things get serious. Now the butterflies start to grow in the stomach. Check your clutch. Drop your bike into gear. Get ready on the throttle. Make sure you're positioned just right. The 5-second board is where the butterflies grow into bats. And as they say in the motocross world, when the green gate drops, the bull pucky stops. What does that mean? Now you have to show everybody what you're made of. That 5-second board is up. The starter is in control. The bike is pinned. You're staring at the gate, waiting for the slightest twitch, waiting to release all those butterflies. Bang! You're off. Well, that was Moto 1 in the 30 plus category. As you can see, my face is nice and clean, so part of the sport, the mystique of it, runny nose and everything. My goal was to crack the top 10 and difficult to see what position I'm in because 3 or 4 classes race together. Now, some of the yellow with black numbers are considered intermediate 30-year-olds. They call them the master vets. I'm a master junior. So I think I cracked the top 10, but we raced together, but for separate points. So I enjoyed the first 2 motos. It's Moto 1 of each series. Obviously, I have a little bit more speed to be adding to my repertoire. I'm cracking the top 10, but I still think with a little more practice and a longer summer training program, I think top 5 is not out of the question. That's my goal. Wow. This sport never seems to amaze me. 38 years and the adrenaline is still as high as it ever was. What a great way to start the year. We're going for a short break. When we come back, words to live by. Welcome back. My dad told me once that if you rest, you rust. And I kept that motto always going through life. And it's taught me that you got to keep moving forward. You can't lay back and get stale and no matter what you're doing. Well, that's one of the lessons my dad taught me. But motocross has taught me similar lessons and some great lessons that I took through life. In this segment, Words to Live By, we'll look at some of the life lessons that I think motocross can teach you as well. I've been asked quite often as to why, as a 50-plus-year-old man, I'm still racing motocross. And it was an interesting question which has a really long answer to it. And one of the things, and I wanted to produce here to you, is an important jersey that I have. And it's all part and parcel of the answer as to why I race motocross. Back when I was in my 20s, when motocross was what I dreamed about and what I wanted to do almost for a living for the most part, is I sat down one year and decided to make a plan to compete as effectively and as intensely as I possibly can. And this jersey reminds me of that. This is an old jersey I had from the mid-'80s, and it's on the wall of my office. And it taught me a lot, and it reminds me a lot about the lessons motocross has given me. This jersey will not even go over my shoulders at this point in my life. I was much smaller when I was in my early 20s, but the memories that this jersey brings back is something that I never forget. And what it does is, motocross has allowed me to develop lifelong skills, believe it or not. Now, how important is being able to drive a motorcycle? In the frame of the scheme of things, it's not that important. But what this sport has taught me is much more important in life than anything I ever did. And the year that I took it so seriously and I was competing as hard as I can is sort of the epitome or the climax of what motocross was all about for me. It started with goal setting. At the beginning of this particular year, and I still do it to this day, I have an idea as to where I need to get, what I need to be doing, and how hard I need to be working to reach that goal. How is that any different than life? So over my 38 years of racing, it allowed me to develop this ability to goal set and to focus on where I needed to be going to get that goal. One of the biggest things that I learned in motocross is not how to shoot a pistol, but what this hand is actually doing. How many times have you heard young kids and middle-aged people as well say, oh, I would have won if this would have happened? And what they're doing is they're pointing a finger at something else. If my bike worked better, what would have happened if my boss didn't prevent me from doing certain things in my line of work? I could have been a superstar in my particular field. And I learned this in motocross, that when you point your finger out at a reason you weren't successful, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. And that was a strong lesson that I learned. When we talk about how, and the term they use in the 21st century is, the track was sketchy. Oh, I couldn't do well today because the track was real rough. The track was dusty. The track was too wet. The track was too narrow. Well, when you're pointing your finger at the track promoter, 3 fingers are pointing back at you saying, all 30 guys in your class had to drive on the same track. Everybody is in the same situation. So it taught me that I should stop pointing and I should look back at myself and say, what can I do differently in life on my motocross bike that would allow me to meet with success? So over the course of my racing career, I began to look at it as a challenge, as opposed to blaming other people, blaming my father for not lubricating my chain properly, blaming my mom because I didn't have the right sandwiches I was supposed to eat before the race. Instead of doing that, I turned around and said, how can I prepare? Those 3 fingers pointing back at me. How can I better prepare? I transferred that into life. What I learned on my bike, I need to prepare for a certain track. I need to prepare for driving in 30-degree Celsius temperatures. I need to prepare for driving on wet tracks. I need to prepare for driving on sand, loam, whatever type of tracks are out there. I'm the only one that needs to prepare. I need to turn that finger back at myself and say, you're the only one in control. Motocross taught me that. I took that skill into life, and I'd like to think that I had a pretty good and still have a pretty good and successful life because of what motocross taught me. Step 1, stop pointing fingers at everybody and anything around you when in fact 3 fingers are pointing back at you. Motocross taught me that. I hope you enjoyed Season 2, Episode number 1, where we looked at road trips, we looked at jumping, we also looked at race number 1, and words to live by. Hope to see you again next week. And don't forget, always pin it.